Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're excited to have you here. We're going to give folks a minute or two to log in, and then we'll get started. But thank you all for being here today. We're really looking forward to connecting with you. So we're going to get started. Welcome to today's webinar on developing supporting strategies for hybrid teaching and learning. We have a really excellent panel for you today. I'm excited to introduce you to them. So just to start, I'm going to go over the agenda with you all. So I'm going to start by introducing you to our panel. Then we're going to meet our host, Class Technologies. We will explore hybrid education, so what it is, how we can use it to engage and support our students. We'll then transition into our panel discussion and end with Q&A. We will be answering questions as we go, but we do have that time designated at the end. This session will also be recorded, so we will share recordings and documentation with this audience after the session. So let's get started, and I want to let you know who's here with us today. So we have Dr. Elfreda Massie here. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Elfreda Massie. I work with Class Technologies. I'm the Vice President for K-12 strategies. I've had over 30 years of experience leading work in public schools, most recently as an interim superintendent for the District of Columbia Public Schools, and also have worked for many years in Baltimore County, Maryland, and Montgomery County, Maryland, again, in various roles, beginning as a teacher and also in various roles in central office, and have done a lot of other work in technology and with turnaround companies and also publishing companies, all supporting education. So I happen to be a lifelong educator, and I'm passionate about teaching and learning.
Thank you, Dr. Massie. We're really happy to have you here. And we also have Dr. Catherine Zeisner, who I'll introduce herself.
Hello, friends. My name is Dr. Catherine Zeisner. I'm a very proud Canadian scholar practitioner. Like Dr. Massie, been in education since, oh my goodness, the 90s, teaching multiple grades, multiple subjects. Then, like Dr. Massie, moving into administration for many years in the district office. And now I'm very proud to be a professor at Gonzaga University in their School of Education, working with doctoral and master's candidates, and most importantly, developing principals through their principal certification program. I am sitting in Canada today because I do travel a lot and do a lot of professional development, and I'm very proud to be working in Ontario, Canada this week with their principals and vice principals. But I am ecstatic to be here to talk about hybrid learning, its benefits, and most importantly, how it can truly provide multiple student success.
Great, thank you. And I'll have you go ahead and talk a little bit about Gonzaga's School of Education and the work that you're doing there.
Yeah, for those who don't know Gonzaga or just know it through the NCAA basketball, it is a beautiful, small private Jesuit college in Spokane, Washington. But most importantly, it has a very important mission of preparing socially responsible practitioners, meaning that we want to provide a variety of research and social activities that allow you to really develop your community and yourself. DELA, which stands for the Department of Educational Leadership and Administration, really works with a variety of people in our community, from parents to teachers to students and to community members. And we're very database, as we all know. That's a great way to start. And supporting students' social, emotional, and behavior needs through multiple courses and classes. And most importantly, we're really systems-based. The only way to bring about change or to help with growth is to truly bring about a systems look at things. And we feel that most importantly, a systems improves people's knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which develop competencies. Thank you, Becca.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our host today, class. So today we're talking about hybrid learning, and class was really developed because through the pandemic and beyond, we saw a real need for increased technology to support more flexible and accessible learning opportunities. Class is the first essential synchronous learning application that allows teachers to deliver an in-person classroom experience online. So it's built on top of Zoom, but we've added things like teaching tools, student engagement tracking, proctored exams, seating charts, and tools so that virtual instructors and teachers can manage their classrooms. All things to make the virtual classroom a little bit more of an engaging place. So with that, there are two tools that our teachers really use for hybrid learning the most. The first being enhanced breakout rooms, where teachers can view and manage all breakout rooms at once, right? So you can be supporting your students in the classroom, but then also have eyes and ears and support for your learners at home. I'll also highlight this proctored view. So what this does is it allows students, individual students or my whole class, to share their screen, their individual screen, with me as their teacher. So I can, again, be circulating my physical classroom and also use this proctored view to take a walk around the virtual classroom and support those students who are at home. So before we transition into our discussion of hybrid learning, I want to talk with our panelists about how we're framing hybrid learning. There's a lot of terms here, and how we define hybrid education may vary from one place to the other. So I'd love to hear from each of you. How do you define hybrid teaching and learning? I'll start with you, Dr. Massie.
Okay, so I define hybrid as the combination of in-person learning as well as online or virtual learning. So when I think about hybrid, at least hybrid for this discussion, we are thinking about not only traditional learning, which is face-to-face in schools and buildings or in universities, but also having another component that supplements, that complements, and that enhances the learning opportunity. So when we think about hybrid, we're thinking, again, not just one traditional mode, like one size fits all. We're really thinking about how do you consider other alternatives and options. And in today's discussion, we're thinking about virtual options that support, supplement, complement, or are used in addition to traditional learning as we know it, that's limited to a place and a space.
Yeah. Absolutely. Would you add anything, Dr. Zeisner?
I agree 100%. Just looking at those two words at the bottom, a hybrid learning model could be where everyone is live together in a face-to-face environment or in the virtual world, or a place in which it's asynchronous, meaning that everyone is accessing pieces on their own timelines and their own schedules. So synchronous meaning we're all together at the same time, and asynchronous meaning everyone has access to the same information on their own schedule.
Right. So more about the space and using that with different groups of students. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right. So now that we've defined how we're framing hybrid education, we're looking ahead to how schools can leverage technology to be more flexible, to offer different options to teachers and students, more accessible to address equity and opportunity gaps, and more personalized to support the growth and well-being of our students. So we're gonna ask our panelists questions, but first we want to start with a question for you, our audience. So you've just been launched a poll. So the question for you is, what has been your biggest challenge with hybrid classes? Go ahead and submit that and we'll take a look. We'll give you about 30 seconds or so to answer that question. All right, so let's look at our poll results. So the biggest thing we're seeing is that the biggest challenge is keeping students engaged. I saw a big nod from Dr. Zeisner. So will you speak to that? Does this surprise you?
No, because it's so easy to become disengaged. So of course we need to somehow supplement that opportunity to capture attention. And we know how difficult it is sometimes to capture attention in face-to-face. Now we need to be doing it in a virtual world. So that doesn't surprise me, and I'm really happy everyone's here to talk about great strategies to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Massie, anything to add to that?
No, I thumbs up what Dr. Zeisner said, and I agree that this has been an issue, helping students to stay engaged in a face-to-face environment as well, keeping students motivated, keeping them engaged. So I'm really glad that we're going to talk about it. And first of all, I believe it is possible to keep them engaged, and we'll talk about that later. But it's been an issue, you know, whether we're talking about K-12, higher ed, the whole idea of engagement. And we know that engagement is very important if we want students to succeed academically as well. So.
Yeah. So let's get into the meat of this conversation then. So in thinking about refining hybrid for specifically student engagement, let's start with you, Dr. Massie. What tips do you have for educators to lead an engaging hybrid classroom?
Okay, I'll share a few. The first thing I want to say is I believe that the same pedagogy that we use and that's successful in a face-to-face classroom, it's the same pedagogy that's important in a hybrid classroom. I mean, we know that one of the most important factors in terms of student achieving has to do with the teacher-student relationship and the teacher's ability to get students engaged and to have them participating actively in class. So I think, you know, first of all, in terms of pedagogy, with good teaching, and there's been a lot of research done on how people learn, not just how students learn, but how people learn. We know that first it's important in any environment to help students or learners to uncover any preconceptions and misconceptions. And I believe that there are many ways to do that in a virtual environment by, you know, conducting brief polls, by using videos, by using, you know, formative assessments, just to have an idea of what students already know prior to entering the learning environment, so that you are not teaching things that students already know. And it's also another way to be sure that students are excited about learning new things and not just the teacher kind of reiterating or helping them to do work that they already know. I think another important strategy in terms of getting students engaged is presenting the content in an exciting way. And the good thing about virtual learning is that there's so much content online. You know, teachers don't have to be the sage on the stage, the expert who knows everything and is teaching. There are opportunities to have students in an online environment engaging with content there's so much content on the web that's free, that most schools and even universities use a learning management system, so there's content in that way as well. In an online environment, there are ways to make teaching exciting because you can still use whiteboards and Jamboards, and again, bringing in videos and having students go to sites, and even bringing in exciting instructors who may not be in the school. I mean, you can engage instructors from around the world who can be joining in real time. A few other things I'd like to mention. There are some things that we know that help students to feel valued, which also helps them to be engaged. So little things like when you are online and as students joining, greeting them by their first names and saying hello and smiling at them. I mean, students, I mean, some of the same dynamics in a face-to-face classroom that make students feel excited and feel good about themselves and their teacher, I think, are important. Acknowledging students when their hands are raised, or students who aren't raising their hands for any number of reasons, not assuming that because their hands aren't raised, that they don't understand the material. There are some students who might be shy. There are some students who know it, but they just need a little more time to think about it and to think about what they want to say. So I think there are ways that we can be sure that we're inviting students, all students, and I'll probably emphasize this many times, all students to participate in the classroom. Doing, again, formative assessments, checking for understanding as you go along. That way you're not losing students, some teachers might run ahead with the curriculum and you forget to, let me just do a quick, easy to do, just like we did a few minutes ago.
I can't tell if we may have lost Elfreda, but I think that'll transition nicely into our next question. There you are, you're back. So I'm going to throw this to you, Dr. Zeisner. What ways can educators build relationships and maintain communication with hybrid students?
The three things that came to my mind when I was prepping for this was ensuring that you've created a safe learning environment, that it's predictable, that there's no surprises, that they know you, that you don't ask anything of them that you wouldn't ask of yourself. And in many, many cases, recognizing that your students can have a flipped learning environment. They can be the leaders. They can host. They can be the daily host. My favorite thing I ever saw was a teacher who gave the host rights to one of their students and had the students playing music when the class started, do class announcements to begin, a very funny weather report because it was a geography sort of science class. And what you're saying to your students is, I trust you. And when students feel safe and your class is predictable and it's been flipped so they feel they can be leader in their situation, they will become much more engaged. And the engagement piece, as we know, is one of the biggest things that people want to see. Was that the question, Becca?
Yeah, about building relationships and maintaining communication. I think that that level of trust and showing your students you trust them inherently builds a foundation and is founded on that. Yeah.
And I think we all... Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to add, and this thought just came to me, and that is showing students who you are, even in a virtual environment, being a little vulnerable. Students love it, sharing with them about your pet, sharing with them about your family, your stories. I mean, just kind of giving them some insight into your world as well as, trying to learn their world. I watched my granddaughters with online learning, and it was interesting some of the things that their teachers did. So, for example, they let all the kids do bring your pet to school day. Those kids that didn't have a pet, they brought dolls, but just a way to show that I'm interested not only in who you are as, in an academic way, but I'm interested in you as a person and what makes you excited. So I just thought about that as just another piece to add to that.
Yeah, the biggest thing is to make connections. So I'm an animal lover. I always start with 6 pictures of my family, my animals, my favorite hobbies. And I ask the students to replicate that. So a picture of their families or a discussion. And it's that idea of how do we make deep connections? I struggled in school. I'm often able to share those stories. I have ADHD, so I often will share that I'm not necessarily as engaged as I need to be. And it's amazing how you'll see students perk up when they feel they can make a connection with you. So the more connections, the more truth, the safer, more predictable opportunities we can provide, the happier they will be to be coming to class.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
There's probably a little delay, Becca, so I apologize if I can't tell whether delay is on my part or your part, but I was also thinking, when we can provide opportunities for one-on-one discussions with students. So, the idea of having office hours or an opportunity aside from the class when you have 24, or more students together, opportunities for either one-on-one tutoring or one-on-one conversations, or again, office hours where students get to chat with you alone. And it's just another way to build deeper connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I think modeling that vulnerability for our students almost gives them permission to do that with us. So I'm glad that you both brought that up.
And if possible, I always have, and again, it's if possible, 30 minutes before class and 30 minutes after class. I call it coffee time. And you don't have to have coffee, but this idea of I will be on, the platform will be open, and you are free to come as early as you want to have a coffee with me and have that sort of chitty chat like you would if it was face to face. And same with after class is done, I remain on for half an hour. Those who want to stay and chat more, and just that idea of I'm available. I'm here and I'm available, and I'm willing to donate some time to develop those deeper relationships.
Mm-hmm. And I think even though you didn't ask this in the question, I think it's just as important in a hybrid environment to provide opportunities for students to build relationships with each other, because we know learning is social. And, whether we're using strategies like breakout rooms or discussions or having kids engage in projects with each other. But if you have some students who are in a face-to-face environment and some are online, depending how your hybrid environment is structured, being sure that, those students have opportunities to interact with each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question coming in from the chat that kind of relates to our third question here on what are the characteristics of engaged? So specifically, what indicators do you use to measure a successfully engaged course? What does that look like for you? I'll have you start, Dr. Zeisner.
Oh my goodness, I think we could probably do a top 10. Number one is participation. So if everyone is participating, I'm feeling that they're engaged. Present, meaning that screens are on, I can see them, we're making that connection. I would also say that work is getting done. So if we ask them to go to a breakout group and come back, that they're all working and present and getting the work done together. I would also say if people are asking questions, just like our audience here has the Q&A, I know then that they're engaged in the content, engaged in the conversation. I think also the before and after class. I think if they're uncomfortable during class, that they come before or after to have that more private one. And then I always feel after class if I get communication somehow. So I get a text or an email with follow-up questions and ideas, then I can sort of say to myself, or an exit ticket is my big one. So I'll have an exit ticket, whether it's in person or on a collaborative platform. I'll ask a question, whether it's what's one word describes how the theories were today, what's one word describe how you feel today. And I will take a sort of a formative poll myself on, did they get it? Was there some deep understanding presented, etc. So multiple things. What do you think, Dr. Massie?
Well, I loved your list. I could just add a few things, but I'll just say, again, ditto to everything that you said. So a few little things that I'll think. One, when students, if students are raising their hands, if they're giving me feedback, if they're giving the instructor feedback and they feel comfortable enough to say, hey, can you slow down? Can you go a little faster? I have a question. I'm not sure that I understand that. If they're not leaving the classroom, they're not leaving the online environment to go do other things. If I can gauge that. If there's more student talk time than there is teacher talk time, that helps me to know if I'm doing all the talking, then I'm probably learning more than the students are. If you're doing the work, then you're doing the learning. If they're contributing when you have breakout rooms, if they're contributing to the breakout room discussions or to the chat discussions or responding to polls. And the other thing I think is important is if students are joining on time, each session because they just don't want to miss anything. So that's part of it. If you're making it exciting enough that students don't, they want to be there even for the start, for the beginning of the discussion. And if they stay on until the end of your class session, I think that's awesome. those are also indicators.
Yeah, and I want to relate that to another question that's here in the chat, which is how do we get students to commit to attending consistently? And you've spoken to relationships and the way that you can leverage those to make your students feel supported. But is there anything you would add specifically around attendance and how challenging that sometimes can feel with hybrid environments?
Number one is, what is the content relevant to the students? And do they understand the expectations of why they need to be present? This is a whole, why do I need to come if I can read a book? Why do I need to come if I can just get it off of Google? So I would say spending a great deal of time explaining why you need to be present. Number two is have marks or grades associated with things during the class, whether there's a quiz, a presentation, a poll, and a mark generated. If you're not present, then you're not going to get the grade. I also feel by having students leading a lot of the learning, they want to become champions for their colleagues, champions for their classmates. So if I'm really nervous and I say, oh my goodness, it's my day, I hope everybody comes, and I'm texting my friends will come and emotionally support me. Well, it's my day to give the opening address or pick the music or whatever. As an instructor, I try and make it extremely engaging from the first minute with my music. So I always play Backstreet Boys, and we have like a little dance party, and like literally with even college students. And I also have a game right from the get-go, whether it's, rock, paper, scissors. And I also, believe it or not, give awards at the beginning of every class. So I reflect on some of the exit tickets from the class before, and then I make funny awards to give out for yesterday's class. And they're really excited to come to find out if their work and their exit ticket earned an award. And so whatever I can do to get them to come and be excited, feel that it's important, and that, marks and grades are generated throughout the class. But there's lots of other ideas. What do you think? What do you think, Dr.?
I'll just add a few things. You said a couple things I started jotting down, and I could tick off that list that you already said them. So one is make learning fun. When you talked about the idea of having games, we all love competition too. Fun competition, where there are opportunities to get rewards. So we all want that extra star, that extra free time, that extra, whatever it is, but do something so that students feel like, hey, when I go, it's going to be exciting. I think not wasting, respecting students' time, not wasting their time. If there's a lot of time and you don't have your act together and you don't have all of your learning materials together and you haven't done enough pre-planning, students don't want to sit there while you're searching for materials or trying to figure out how to do something. They're very savvy. Tech savvy. So, it's important for teachers to be as prepared as possible so that students know that as soon as they enter, you're on. The other thing I would say is helping students to know that every single student matters. Your participation matters. If a student misses a class, something small, I missed you. Where were you? We needed you. Any way that you can let students know that, when you are not here, we miss you, we need you, we need your opinions, your classmates need you. And I think sometimes you can set it up when you set up group work so that it's dependent upon all of the group being there, not just one or two people. That also helps students to feel committed not only to you and to coming to class, but to each other. Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we've learned in the past couple of years is that it is possible to form real relationships virtually. And it just takes intention around setting that up. So one more question around engagement before we move forward. This one is also coming from the audience. This has been a huge challenge with virtual and hybrid learning is tracking engagement and participation. So how can you participation in the online environment in an equitable manner? Dr. Massie, let's start with you. Okay, so we started talking about there are different platforms. There are platforms that have tools built in that help you to track engagement, that help you, and that give teachers that information directly. So it tracks when students entered, when they didn't, whether or not they contributed to the class discussions, either through the chat or in breakout rooms, whether or not, they stayed the entire class, or whether or not they left early, or whether or not they were tardy, late coming, or whether they were absent. So I think there are ways to track engagement. I think some of it still is a part of students. I mean, when you're in a face-to-face environment, teachers you look at your students, you see there are some nonverbals to help to determine whether or not, you're not just, occupying seat time, or whether or not you are engaged, just, or disengaged. So I think there are a lot of cues that you have to read. Also, most platforms now have emojis and lots of ways to send signals for students to give feedback to teachers, or to give feedback to each other, so that that they are or aren't engaged. And of course, there are ways, if you're giving assessments or tests, there are ways to capture that data as well in an online environment. Would you like to add to that, Dr. Zeisner?
Yeah, agree. That's why I like to do an entry ticket. So, and then I collect them so that I know that they're there, and we've already kicked off the learning. When I was a classroom teacher, I used Class Dojo. I was a French teacher, and it was, even though it's sort of a behavior primary kind of app, I used it whenever anyone answered a question to track on my iPad. So-and-so answered a question today. So-and-so answered a question today. So class list beside you in your ticking boxes, whether you've got a tally chart, whether you're using an app, anything like you would regularly to track who's put their hand up, who's answered a question. I also love self-assessments. So, today's exit ticket is, how do you feel you participated today? Were you engaged today? And breaking down those conversations of what I'm looking for in a virtual world, screens on, eyes up, emojis, etc. I love self-assessments because I find people are harder on themselves than we are. But again, making sure that they know it's coming, what exactly you'd be looking for, back to that safe, trusting learning environment, and then collecting them as an exit ticket or a formative assessment.
And Dr. Zeisner, you make a good point. Students have to know what you mean by engagement. Different teachers mean different things in terms of what they're measuring. And engagement isn't always that you are speaking up, because, again, we have different ways of learning, and there are some students who are more introverted or who are shy. And even in a face-to-face classroom, they're not the ones to speak up. So it's up to the teacher to try to determine what are ways to be sure that those students, that you're reaching students, not just the students who are outgoing and who would put their hands up, but you have to think about ways. And as you said, one of the ways to even determine that is to help students to, kind of brainstorm. Let's think about, how will we know that we're engaged as a class? And what does it mean to you? So, self-assessments and getting their input as well, even from small children, they can help us to answer those questions.
I think it's subject specific too. I love in a literacy classroom when you have group work and everyone has a role. Somebody may be the note keeper, somebody may be the resource collector. And I want to be and honor and be proud of those participants just as much as the keynote addresser or whatever the roles are you have. Because we want them to be very proud and to self-advocate. Next time, I wasn't really participating today. Can I be the keynote next time? And as soon as I see someone self-advocating, I immediately go with them to my computer to show I'm tracking that. That's a huge thing for me. I want that on your progress report, report cards. So-and-so is self-advocating to be more of a leader or to be a better group member. But it's that idea of, depending on, and in science, it's the same. Someone is the record keeper, someone's doing the experiment, someone's getting the resources. It's subject specific too. But as the teacher, you need to know those kinds of roles that you can give to someone to make them feel safe. And my favorite is, hey, you've been the record keeper 4 times, and I'm so proud of you. You have excellent handwriting and you great jot notes. Do you want to try a different role today? And whether they say yes or no, they at least know you're paying attention, you're trying to give them opportunities, you're developing that trust. So it's subject specific, I think.
Mm-hmm. And what I love with the idea, I think it's so important if you're teaching to use breakout rooms. And it's just a great opportunity when you think about engagement to have student leaders, where they're leading groups and you can even rotate that responsibility. And students like it, even with breakout rooms, even though you may not be in each breakout room, it still, again, helps them to feel that they have greater responsibility and that you trust them to lead in those rooms, even though you have ways that you can see what's happening in those rooms. But, giving them the responsibility and, students step up to the plate.
Yeah, I love all of this. I think empowering students with defining what participation looks like, first and foremost, let them in on it, right? Let them share with you how they prefer to participate. So let's keep moving forward in now looking at some of the challenges and considerations with hybrid teaching and learning. So what needs to be taken into consideration when developing a hybrid model for underserved populations? Dr. Zeisner, I'll let you start.
I'm not making any assumptions. I'm just going to give some ideas really for any population. Is infrastructure. Do we have access to a computer? Do we have access to Wi-Fi and a connection? Do we have access to a quiet workspace? It doesn't matter underserved or not. There are people without computers, without connections, without a quiet workspace. And making those assumptions is not, it's not fair. We have many students looking after younger siblings, many students who share a bedroom, many students who the only place to work is in the living room on a couch with the TV going. So number one is, can they access, can they have a private space, and will they have a consistent connection? So those are the first three things that come to my mind. We have lots of ways to overcome those, but those to me are really things to consider.
I agree with everything that you said, and I think I would probably only add one thing, and that is the ease of access and a way for learners to access their classrooms or their studies with as few distractions as possible. Because people have a lot of different environments that they're trying to work in when you're in a hybrid setting. And, so, everybody doesn't have a quiet, safe place. So I would just think, again, in terms of just the ease of being able to get on and being able to focus. And the only other thing you mentioned about access to connectivity, when I think about underserved, I also think about students with disabilities. And, being sure that, we've thought about whatever types of adaptations need to occur for students with disabilities or students who are, who speak different languages or who are English language learners, thinking about what adjustments do we need to make for them as well. So,
yeah, all the accessibilities, visual, interpretive, auditory, etc. Ensuring that whatever platform you're using has the options for people to use. I don't know about you, but I love it. Even when I watch a movie, having the subtitles, having the subtext. Yes. I think that's critical. And I think that's one of the most important things moving forward. Now that we've got a grasp of this, is how are we making it more accessible for all learners?
Yes, I agree. Or even the idea of having a sign language interpreter, which I know is something that we think is really important as, a possibility. And again, when we think about not just underserved populations, there are many students who, for whether it's physical, economical reasons, or students who may be homeless, or students who are incarcerated, or students who have been expelled, who need to have access, who need some options and alternatives that are other than coming into a traditional classroom. So I think we have to, again, think about how do we provide options so that they get the highest quality education and that it's not a second thought and kind of a second-rate platform. So we need to think, again, about students who might be outliers that don't fit the general population. How can we make learning easy for them, and how can we make it accessible and how can we provide equitable learning opportunities for them.
And confidential. Two things with regards to confidentiality: incarcerated or many students who are hospitalized right now for long periods of time, that their privacy needs to be honored. And then the other piece is the background. People should not be able to see other people in people's homes or where they are located. So ensuring privacy and confidentiality at all times. Yes. And just taking that into consideration.
Yes, and even when you mentioned confidentiality and privacy, it just made me also to think about security.
Yeah.
Safety and security issues and compliance issues, being sure that, we've addressed those so that there are no issues, in that regard either.
Yeah, there's a lot to take into this whole picture, because virtual learning provides more flexibility, but we have to make sure that we are supporting different types of learners then in that way, and we're not just catering to one type of virtual or hybrid learner. So what do you see as the barriers to adoption for hybrid teaching and learning? Dr. Massie, we'll start with you.
I think the biggest barrier is we've always done it this way, whatever this way was. I think that, we all did a quick pivot to either virtual or hybrid in the last 2 years now. And I think for many of us, it's having the vision to understand that, we want to provide options and alternatives for all students. Some students excelled in a virtual environment and some excel in a hybrid and some didn't. So I think part of it is us really thinking that if we're really, truly interested in assuring that all students excel, then just like we have other options with where we send our kids, families have choice. You can send them to a charter, a public school, a private school, or a religious school, and some students will do well in one environment and some won't. So I think everything should be on the table. There's a saying by Deming that says our systems are perfectly designed to get the results that they get. Well, if you look at the results that we're getting with traditional education, all students are not excelling. I mean, there are achievement gaps, if you disaggregate the data in any number of ways in any number of populations. So, technology is not going away. Disruptions are not going away. And learning loss has always occurred, though we know that it's been more challenging. And I'll put a footnote for all of our teachers who are here. What I do know, I think it's a disservice to say that students weren't learning during the pandemic, because teachers were doing everything that they could to assure that students were learning. Students were learning. Learning was different. It may have been challenging, but students were learning and teachers were learning and we were all learning. So again, I think the challenge is a mindset. I think it's, if you only look at hybrid or virtual as a stopgap, as an emergency, that's short-sighted. I think it should be just a strategy that we continue to think about and that we plan for in advance in the event that there are planned or unplanned interruptions, disruptions, and again, just for planned options so that, students have choice and families have choice.
I feel one of the barriers is parents or families. Two reasons why. One is they did not learn through this model, and it may be difficult for them to understand the benefits. And secondly, because they didn't learn through this model, they are more biased towards the traditional classroom. They want their child socially active at a school building. So to me, one of the barriers is getting families to understand that this is a wonderful, positive, capable option. I love the fact you talked about the different options now available, Dr. Massie. This is another option. And through the pandemic, for students who have extreme anxiety, who were not well and hospitalized or incarcerated, those who were bullied, were so thriving using this. They felt safe finally. They felt they could contribute. They felt that they could still be productive. So again, it's a barrier is us getting out to the community, modeling and showing how this is possible, having students share why they like it and what they're feeling about it, and getting past some of those fears that some families may have only because they just don't quite understand fully yet the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And we could talk about money. We could talk about money too. Money is a barrier too.
Oh yeah. You made me think about one other thing. I went to a conference and I heard a viewpoint of parents who were saying that, at first they were opposed to the idea of having any online conferences with teachers. And then there were others who said, I started to realize I felt more empowered. I wasn't afraid to go into the building. I felt that we're kind of face to face with each other. They felt that they had better standing, and they felt that they were more appreciated. They didn't feel, and they said, there were students who said, I didn't feel the same microaggressions, in an online environment. So there's something about that in terms of parents and parent-teacher communication and relationships that I think we can learn in an online environment. And maybe it's because some parents didn't have to drive an hour to the school and then sit there for a 15-minute conference and go back. That's right. They had greater opportunities to be involved in their students' education by just, jumping in on a 15-minute call and them having a conversation and jumping on.
And they could do it during the day at work, as opposed to I have 4 kids and I can only come from 6 to 7, and I can only come 6 to 6:15 with you and 6:15 to 6:30 here. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things is it can be more accessible for those who have the infrastructure to be part. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So I think the key is
their families.
If we want it to be successful, I think we can. It's like the glass half full and half empty. Regardless of how we got to the point that we are, now thinking more about digital learning and online learning and hybrid learning, I think we should see it as this is an opportunity to recreate education in a way that we believe more students will be successful. And I think we just say, this is the challenge, and we step up to it. So what are we going to do with what we know and what we've learned?
I think too, I don't know about you, but I did my entire master's online because I wanted to go to a university in another country. We had, and many teachers have been doing online courses. I've been teaching online courses since 2006. This isn't new. It's just new to those that haven't done it yet. So let's continue to talk to those who've done it for a long time, who are very successful at it, who have unbelievably cool ideas, and let's continue to share best practices and not be fearful, because it's not new. It's not new. Yes. It's just new to you. And, I got a great master's that way. I got a doctorate through hybrid, which makes me proud. So learning, success, safety, all that is possible.
I agree.
So I'm going to show you 2 stats, and based off that conversation, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about this. So the pandemic pushed all of education, K through 12, higher ed. It pushed us all to use and rely on synchronous online learning. So 68% of students reported they would prefer a hybrid learning option post-pandemic. 94% of high school students today expect their college classes to have a virtual component. Thoughts on this? Does this surprise us? How does this relate to your work today, Dr. Zeisner?
Yeah, I'm so happy that it's the student's voice that you've reached out to get. Student voice is where we should get most of our data from when it comes to wanting to make improvements, changes, understand, etc. I agree that it's almost 75, it's almost 3/4 of them prefer it. Again, there's such a social aspect to being a teenager that there is a protective mode in being online. You don't have to get out of your bed. You don't have to get dressed. You don't have to try and feel or be something that you're not. So I'm not surprised that they have preferred it. And I'm not surprised that there's a chunk that didn't, because there are students. I'm married to a guy who just gets so much energy being around people and does not feel the virtual world enhances his learning. So he's in that smaller chunk. But that's why we like hybrid, because then you get a little bit of both. it's like when we were learning about the different learning styles, your auditory, your visual, your kinesthetic, right? And then we provided opportunities to use your strengths to learn. It's the same here. We're gonna give you options and opportunities to build upon your strengths. As someone who works in a college, the reason why that number is so high is because there's so much content to get through, and it's just another opportunity to provide content to our students. So whether we have this synchronous face-to-face class, I can provide some asynchronous learning opportunities, more videos to watch, flip the classroom. So they're right. And I'm really proud that the students are right.
Yeah, I would just say I've read a lot of Ian Yuke's work where he refers to digital natives and digital immigrants, and that this generation of students, they're digital natives. Even my first grade granddaughter, rather, not my first grader, my granddaughter who's in first grade, she adapts so quickly to the technology, and she gets on and she talks about going to coding classes, and that she enrolled herself in a third grade, some online club. And I said, oh, you knew how to do that? And she said, absolutely, I knew how to do that. So I think, this learning mode, the idea of virtual hybrid, you're right, Dr. Zeisner. I think it might be new to some of us, but for this generation, it's natural. And it is the way of the future. And the only other thing I would say is, the idea of students taking virtual classes, it makes the idea of going to college more affordable for some families, more feasible for students who have to work, who can't just, who just don't have the same type of schedule that, going to a class every day, going into a building. Again, the time saver alone with driving and parking and being able to take classes in your pajamas, practically, there's something to that. Again, I had another granddaughter here who said, Grandma, I like being able to eat when I want and to wear my casual clothes, and I learn more. And she said, my teachers, now we do more projects than we did before. It's more exciting. So, she had smart teachers who knew that there were a lot of ways to get students engaged with project-based learning because there are far more resources now available to them as well. So I'm not surprised at all. And, it's the future. It's the present. It's not the future. It's the way of the present and the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, let's talk about the evolution of hybrid classes. With how hybrid classes are running now and the work that we're seeing done for hybrid learning in the future, how do you think hybrid courses increase access for students and schools? Dr. Massie, we'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it again in terms of, students, if you the fact that you don't have to travel long distances, the fact that it's being able to get online and to take courses. I think it's just a 21st century skill. So just the fact that we have these opportunities now, I think the fact that, again, it takes away some of the microaggressions that some students feel that they faced in classes. There are many students who drop out or were potential dropouts because they just don't want to go into a building. If you look at some students who felt isolated in a building, the loners, they're students, a lot of the students who typically have acted out, dropped out, or not been engaged, they found a safe way. You have a safe way to be engaged with learning. So I think that makes sense as well. And I think I've mentioned just a lot of ways in terms of increased access if you need additional content, like through tutoring. If you want to engage in dual courses, if you want to enroll in college courses the same time that you're going in high school, if you have, you need credits to complete for high school to graduate, it's another opportunity for you to do it in an online way. So I think, again, there's so many ways that it increases access and that it gives opportunities for students who might not have completed their high school or college degree, their high school education or their college degree, to now do that and to do it in a way that they can achieve and that they'll, I mean, I think it gives them it just gives them equal footing. There's more than just going to a building and trying to complete a GED or just saying, I just dropped out and couldn't complete my courses. And it's more affordable.
Yeah, the big thing for me is it's the time. So I can't come 9 to 5. I do work, I have children, I'm supporting aged parents. So to me, it's the access, the 24/7 access. It is so important to me. There's also people who work during the day and want to take courses at night. So this whole idea of time access. The second thing that I'm proud of that hybrid's done is brought the world together. So even though I'm sitting in Canada, I'm able to have a lovely conversation with you in the United States and around the world. Or I have people from Singapore in my doctoral courses, or a beautiful young lady from Hungary and a family from China. And what they're bringing to other people in the cohort is so enriching. So this idea of bringing the world together to be in a virtual world makes me so happy, because we have so much to learn from each other. The other thing is, so many people have hobbies, important hobbies to them, sports, other learning that they do, and they're not able to be present at school. So what some of these collaborative platforms have allowed for is them to access while they are traveling for their sport or hobby. So there's no need for us to be upset about someone not being present at school because they're on a ski, a big ski trip, or I was at a school that the students all played hockey on Fridays and Mondays. Well, we didn't mind, because they would just access the platform while they were at the hotel on the weekends, and they didn't miss a beat. That makes me happy, that we can have student athletes who continue to do well in both their lives. So world access, time access, sports access, it's just allowing things to be less traditional and more individualized. And the answer can be yes. As an administrator, I was a principal for so long, and 90% of the time the word out of my mouth was, no, we can't do that. Now it's, sure, we can try that. Sure, we can meet those needs. And that just makes people feel that, I don't know, I guess it just makes them feel like they can be successful no matter what they want to do.
I love it too, that if you have 2 or 3 kids that want to take a course, and you have 3 in one building or one state and 2 in another, and you can connect students around the world. And think about it. You can learn any language that you want. You can take any higher level course or any fun course and do it with people around the world. That's real learning too.
Yeah, I love it. I think that with both of those responses, you really just touched on these final 2 questions, right? The unique needs that hybrid courses deliver, and then how we gain administrator, family, and even student buy-in, right? It offers all of these things. So we are reaching the top of the hour. This went by really quickly. This conversation with the 2 of you has been inspiring and really exciting. And I've been out of the classroom for 2 years, and this makes me want to go back. This makes me miss teaching. So we really appreciate you all being here with us today. I want to highlight for our audience, we have a number of resources that we're going to support you with. So you'll have access to the recording of this, as well as this slide deck, and these resources listed here. We'll make sure to share these with you so that you can start leveraging these ideas in your hybrid classrooms. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Zeisner and Dr. Massie. This has been inspiring. If anybody here in the audience has questions or wants to learn more about class, we're here to support you as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.